I remember the first night clearly, though I've tried to forget it 100 times. The highway was empty, stretching endlessly to the rolling hills, pale fog curling over cracked asphalt like ghostly fingers. My headlights cut a thin path through the mist, illuminating nothing but swaying trees, their shadows dancing across the guardrails. I felt completely alone, though the air was thick with a strange, humming presence, subtle at first, almost like breathing. Somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard the faint rustle of feet, or maybe claws, on the gravel shoulder. My car's radio had gone silent moments before, leaving only the faint crackle of static, like it was listening, waiting. I slowed, heart thudding in my chest, and that's when I saw it, or rather, what wasn't quite right about it. Its shape shifted unnaturally under the pale light. Tall, lanky, and almost human, yet something about its movement, wrong, uncanny, too deliberate. I tried to convince myself it was a deer or a trick of the fog, but the air itself felt heavy, charged, alive, as if it was watching me as much as I was watching it. My pulse sped up, and a chill ran down my spine. Something ancient, something patient, was waiting out there in the darkness. I gripped the wheel tighter, whispering to myself that I'd keep driving, keep moving forward. And then it stepped closer to the edge of the road, its eyes catching the reflection of my headlights. And in that instant, I knew I had never been alone. That's when I saw it. The road was empty. Night had settled thick, heavier than the air I breathed. Autumn leaves whispered along the asphalt, drifting with no wind. The highway stretched ahead, straight and pale under the flickering streetlights. Each one blinked in unison, like tired eyes, struggling to stay open. Shadows leaned and stretched across the road, reaching, retreating. I gripped the wheel. The hum of tires against wet asphalt was steady, yet somehow wrong. Every so often the lights dimmed and the world blurred. Then the flashes returned, sharp and uneven, revealing something moving just beyond the shoulder. Too fast to be human. A figure, or maybe many, slipping between the trees. They didn't run. They glided. Fog began to coil along the road, thick and damp, filling the space between my car and the forest. It pressed against my face through the open window, smelled of wet pine and something older, something decaying. I slowed, but the road seemed longer, stretching under the headlights like it was alive. The trees leaned closer. Their branches scratched against each other, whispering in rhythm with the flickering lights. I blinked, and for a heartbeat, the fog shaped itself into a face. No features, just a suggestion of eyes, hollow and wide. I shook my head. The air was still, almost too still. The only sound was the soft thrum of the engine and my own shallow breath. Every turn of the wheel felt guided. I swore the road bent under an unseen hand, curving to keep me inside the shadows. The headlights caught a flash of movement again, just beyond reach. A pale shape, vanishing when I blinked. Static crawled across the dashboard, lights flickering in erratic bursts. A soft tapping, like fingernails against metal, echoed from somewhere behind the seats. I leaned forward, trying to see, but the fog swallowed the view. The trees were closer now, their trunks jagged silhouettes against the intermittent glow. I tried to speak. My voice felt swallowed, soft as mist. No words came. The road narrowed. I could smell wet earth and rot. And something else, something faint, like burnt sugar, sticky and metallic. It lingered in the fog, clinging to the hair at the back of my neck. Shadows moved faster now, not just at the edges of the trees, but within them, soft, rustling steps over dry leaves, circling, never leaving. The lights stuttered, as if frightened, trembling in their posts. I wanted to turn back, but the road behind me had changed. The lines were broken. The asphalt seemed slicker, darker, folding in on itself. It was as if I had driven into a place that existed only for this stretch of highway. A flicker, brief, sharp, and for a moment I felt watched. Eyes, countless and unblinking, tracking from the fog. I realized I hadn't seen any other cars. No distant headlights. Just me, and whatever waited in the edges. The fog thickened, swallowing the mirrors, the lines, the trees themselves. The air vibrated with silence, heavy and soft at once. Breath came in shallow waves. A shiver slid down my spine. I could hear my own heartbeat, too loud, echoing in the stillness. A branch tapped the roof of the car. Then another, slow, deliberate. Something was walking alongside me, just beyond where my headlights reached. And yet, when I dared to glance, nothing moved. The fog shifted like liquid. Shapes dissolved before I could name them. I realized then the highway wasn't empty. It had never been. It was alive with patience, waiting, watching. I wanted to stop, to scream, to turn and drive away. But the road didn't allow it. Every turn of the wheel felt guided. Every motion, every breath, felt coaxed along a path I didn't choose. The lights flickered one last time. Shadows bent. The fog swallowed everything. And for a moment, I saw it clearly. I may never leave the stretch alone. The tires hummed against asphalt. The road stretched forever. And the fog whispered my name. The field lay quiet. Silver light spilled over the stalks, soft and pale under the harvest moon. The air smelled of dry earth, cut straw, and something faint metallic. I stepped closer, boots crunching lightly against the soil. Every movement stirred a faint rustling, but deeper in the rows, the rustling didn't answer me. It moved on its own. Eyes glimmered, tiny points of reflected light, pinned to the darkness between corn stalks. They didn't scatter when I shifted. They blinked, all at once. I froze. Each pair followed my steps. A breath caught in my throat. The hairs at the back of my neck prickled. The stalks swayed, though there was no wind. Shadows leaned together, forming shapes just beyond recognition. I could feel them, close, watching. A soft, almost inaudible whisper, or maybe it was a wind, brushed my ear. Leave. I stepped forward. The soil was cold, damp beneath my fingers as I brushed the stalk aside. The eyes didn't waver. They multiplied, reflecting the moon like small, careful mirrors. A shiver ran down my spine. The night grew heavier. Every inhale felt thick, heavy with the scent of soil, and something older, more patient. The field seemed to breathe in tandem with me. Exhale. Inhale. I could hear them then. Soft steps rustling between the stalks, just beyond sight. Not mine. They circled, careful, deliberate, yet unseen. I want to call out. My voice stayed lodged in my chest. The stalks bent closer, brushing my arms, my face, leaving tiny scratches along my skin. Each one felt intentional, like a warning. The eyes reflected more than moonlight now. They held shapes, hints of figures crouched low, watching, waiting. I stepped back. So did they. The field seemed to stretch wider with each heartbeat. Every familiar path dissolved into shadow and fog. I was alone, yet not alone. A gust stirred the upper leaves. The whisper returned, soft, urgent, almost human. Leave. Leave now. I wanted to obey, but curiosity pinned me in place. I bent closer to peer between two stalks. The eyes blinked in exact unison, tracking me, calculating. The air turned still, thick, pressing against my chest, my face. Breath felt like it would not pass. A shadow slipped across the moonlight. No shape, just movement, smooth and silent. I could hear a hum in the distance, low, vibrating through the soil and into my bones. The stalks shivered again. Each I followed, reflecting that faint, pale glow. I felt a presence step beside me. Not touching, not needing to. The silence pressed harder than words. And then I realized I had not heard my own steps for some time. The earth beneath me had no reply. No crunch, no shift. The field had swallowed them. I backed away slowly, tracing my steps with careful fingers along the stalks. The eyes followed, always following, blinking together, in a rhythm I could not name. The whisper rode the wind again. Leave. I turned. The path I had come from looked different. Curved, elongated, darker. The moonlight bent strangely across the stalks. I could not find a landmark. The field had shifted. The air smelled of dry husk and iron. Something unspoken waited in the quiet spaces. I did not need to see it to know it was there. One last glance. The eyes blinked, unrelenting. Perfect, small, reflective, endless. The whisper trailed behind me as I walked. Leave. I did not run. I did not speak. I just moved, slowly, guided by a sense I did not trust. The field watched. The corn stalks rustled. And in the pale glow of the harvest moon, I understood I was being observed not out of curiosity, but out of patience. And patience lasts longer than fear. The wind settled. The eyes dimmed, but they never disappeared. I left the field, but the weight of their gaze lingered. Cold, still unblinking. The forest was still. Branches leaned heavy with the weight of night. The air smelled of damp pine, decaying leaves, and something faintly metallic, like old blood. I followed a narrow trail, broken by roots and shadow. Moonlight spilled in pale streaks, catching on the wet bark. Something shifted in the undergrowth, too quick to name, too quiet to fear yet. And then I saw it. A cabin, hollow and waiting, tucked between the trees. It was gray with age. The roof sagged like tired shoulders. Smoke didn't rise from the chimney. But the door was slightly ajar, swaying with a breathless creak. I stepped closer. The moss underfoot was soft, wet, each footfall swallowed, muted. A thin wind tugged at my hair, carrying the smell of dust and smoke long dead. Inside was darker than the forest outside. Shadows pooled in corners, thick and liquid. The floorboards groaned beneath my weight, responding in whispers. Every surface was layered with decay, yet traces of life lingered. A cup tipped over, dried liquid staining the wood. A chair moved slightly, though I hadn't touched it. The air trembled with hums. Low, vibrating, almost static. It pressed against my ears and teeth, filling the silence. I crouched, tracing a finger along the wall. It was cold, then pulsing. A faint throb beneath the surface, like the cabin itself was breathing. Dust shifted around my hands. A soft rustle. I froze. The room smelled of old paper, damp cloth, and something sharper like iron, hidden under the rot. The shadows moved. Not in the corners, not with the light, but against it. Something slid along the edges of my vision. A flicker of dark where no flicker should be. I blinked. It was gone. I stepped deeper. Floorboards moaned under careful weight. The walls seemed to pulse again beneath my touch. Static hummed louder, curling around my skull, filling my chest. Breath caught, shallow and uneven. I could feel the cabin's attention. Not hostile, patient. A window rattled. A shadow fell across the floor. Not from me, not from the moon. The light shifted, pale and hesitant, revealing a pattern in the dust. Footprints. Small, deliberate, too human to be animal. Yet the cabin was empty. I tried to tell myself I was imagining. The hum, the pulse beneath the walls, the subtle movements. But every instinct screamed otherwise. I felt the air thicken, press against my skin, whisper along my hair. I reached for the fireplace. Ash lay undisturbed, yet the hearth smelled faintly of smoke. I brushed my fingers through it. Cold, then warmth, fleeting, like a heartbeat beneath the stone. The room tilted, not physically, but in perception. Shadows stretched, leaning toward me, rustling from the corners. A presence curling behind my shoulder, watching. I wanted to leave, but the door now seemed further away. The hum wrapped around the frame, around the threshold, holding it just out of reach. I could hear nothing but the pulse, the static, the whisper of unseen feet across the floorboards. I traced my hands along the walls again. Dust fell in tiny clouds, catching the moonlight, and the pulse responded. Faster, slower, a rhythm that wasn't mine. The cabin smelled of damp wood, of rot, of iron, of whispers that lingered longer than wind should. I pressed my ear against the wall. The static hummed beneath my skull. A soft vibration traveled through my bones. The walls were alive. A chair creaked. The floor groaned. Not from me, not from wind. I stepped back, suddenly aware of the silence that followed. The pulse slowed. The hum softened. Shadows receded. But only just. Something remained in the corners, patient, unblinking. I turned to leave. The door swung freely now. The night waited outside, pale and empty. I didn't look back. But even as I walked into the forest, I felt it beneath the soles of my feet. The cabin's pulse, quiet but relentless. A hollow heartbeat in the dark, waiting. The ridge stretched in beneath my boots. Fog hugged the ground, pale and heavy, curling around roots and rocks. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, cold against my cheeks. I stepped carefully. Each footfall sank slightly into moss and fallen needles. A branch shivered above me, though the wind was still. Something moved in the fog, and then I heard it. My name, whispered, soft at first, teasing, almost like the rustle of leaves. I paused. The sound came again, clearer now, closer, echoing, bending around the ridge, impossible to place. I tried to shake it off. The fog swirled, brushing my face, wet and cold. The trees leaned, their trunks twisted, reaching toward me as if they could smell fear. The bark groaned, branches pressed together, whispering, creaking, swaying without wind. Shadows flickered beneath the fog. My name again, urgent this time, a soft insistence that prickled my skin. I wanted to answer, but my lips felt heavy, locked. I kept moving, step by cautious step. The ridge narrowed. The fog thickened, swallowing the ground and horizon alike. Every breath was wet, chilled, tasting faintly of stone and decay. The whispers echoed once more. From above, below, behind, everywhere, not one voice, but many layering together, all saying the same thing, calling me. A twig snapped. I jumped. The fog rippled like water. The trees leaned closer, their shadows stretching, bending, framing the path. I felt their gaze, not seeing, but knowing. The whispers faded suddenly. Silence fell, complete, chilling. It pressed against my ears, my chest, my thoughts. A bird took flight, somewhere unseen. The brush rustled. Nothing else moved. I could hear my own heartbeat, sharp, impatient, loud in the stillness. The ridge seemed to stretch farther than before. Rocks that had been close now lay just out of reach. The fog thinned briefly, revealing jagged trees clawing at the sky, then thickened again, swallowing everything but the narrow path beneath my feet. The whispers returned, quieter now, thread-like, brushing my ear, teasing. A warning, a lure. I couldn't tell which. The ground trembled slightly underfoot, or perhaps it was me. The air smelled of wet moss, old leaves, and something acrid, like iron hidden deep in the soil. My skin prickled, every hair standing. The trees leaned further. Branches creaked in protest or purpose. I could feel eyes in the fog, unseen, patient, watching each hesitant step. My own shadow flickered along the rocks, trembling in pale light. The whispers faded again, leaving nothing but the cold. Silence stretched, taut and waiting. I held my breath, afraid to exhale. I turned slowly. The path behind me was gone. Fog filled it, thick and featureless. I was alone, yet not alone. A rustling rose from the ridge, somewhere high, or maybe low. I couldn't tell. It was an animal. Not quite. The air seemed to shiver in response. I stepped forward, one cautious foot in front of the other. The fog swirled, brushing my hair, my face, wet and cold. Whispers brushed past me again. Soft, urgent, familiar. And then silence. The ridge leveled. Moonlight broke through the fog in pale shards, revealing the jagged shapes of the trees leaning ever closer. The wind stirred briefly, carrying a faint scent of iron and moss. I felt the ridge watching me, patient. I kept moving, each step careful, measured. The whispers had faded completely now, but the memory of them lingered, soft and echoing, like footsteps following just behind. The fog thinned enough to see the path ahead. The trees remained still, but their leaning forms suggested patience. Eyes I could not see, watching, waiting. And in that quiet, I realized the ridge had called me, and I had answered. The creek wound through the forest like a silver thread. Moonlight kissed the water, pale and trembling. The air smelled of wet stone, moss, and the faint tang of iron. I followed the narrow bank, careful with each step. Rocks shifted under my weight, soft splashes echoing in the still night. The leaves whispered, brushing together like cautious hands. And then I saw it, a dark shape in the water, not fully formed, shifting, blending human limbs with angles that felt animal, impossible. I froze. The reflection trembled with the ripples, but when I moved, it didn't. Each footstep echoed softly against the earth, but the shadow remained unbound by rhythm. It watched. The creek murmured past my ankles, cold and wet. I knelt, fingertips brushing the surface. The figure bent with the ripples, elongating, shrinking, always unnatural. I could smell damp fur, or maybe hair, mixed with the metallic scent of blood. I took another step. The shadow followed, or maybe anticipated. The shape shifted again, elongating arms, bending legs that shouldn't bend. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the smell of wet leaves and rot. Branches brushed my face. The figure in the water moved differently with every blink, impossible yet undeniable. My own reflection stared back, blurred, pale, frightened. I whispered my breath into the night. It answered with silence. Then a rustle along the bank, soft, deliberate, patient. I turned my head. Nothing. The shadow seemed closer now. Not in the water, but under it, a depth, unseen, waiting beneath the ripples. I could feel it beneath my skin, a soft vibration, like the earth itself holding its breath. I stepped forward again. My shoes pressed into mud, leaving soft impressions that the water tried to swallow. The reflection didn't align. It moved independently, bending, curling, folding. Human eyes, or something like them, glimmered darkly. They watched. A frog leapt from a rock. The splash echoed. The shadow didn't flinch. It rippled, like liquid darkness, stretching past banks, defying gravity, space, reason. I swallowed. The air tasted wet, earthy, metallic. The hum of the forest deepened, vibrating underfoot. I wanted to step back, but my legs were led. My eyes stayed locked on impossible reflection. The creek curved sharply. The moonlight caught the shadow differently now. It was taller, thinner, stretched across the water. Parts of it melted into ripples. Other parts solidified, sharp, jagged. Each movement was wrong. All at once too slow, too fast, too deliberate. I reached the edge of the creek. The mud pressed cold against my palms as I crouched closer. The air smelled faintly of wet fur and metal again. And then the shadow blinked. A slow, deliberate motion, not like any living thing should. I stepped back. My own reflection trembled in the water, pale and fragile. The shadow didn't follow exactly. It lingered, mirrored and fractured, waiting. I turned to leave the bank. Soft footsteps echoed behind me. Not mine, not aligned with the creek. I didn't dare look over my shoulder. The forest hummed in anticipation. Every rustle, every drip from leaves, seemed amplified. The shadow remained in the creek, unmoving, shifting, watching. The water reflected the moon again, but the shadow had changed. Not fully human, not fully animal. A being of impossible angles and patience. I felt its gaze through the fog, through the night, through the wet earth. I walked on, feet sinking into soft soil. The creek curled away, silver and quiet. The shadow remained, fractured in the water, patient, waiting. And as I left, I understood it did not need to follow. It only needed to watch. The gas station loomed ahead, quiet beneath the foggy night. Its sign swung slowly, creaking in the wind, pale light flickering over chipped paint. The asphalt was slick with dew, smelling faintly of gasoline and rust. I stepped from the car. The tires hissed on the wet pavement. A soft hum from the flickering lights above followed me, uneven, almost alive. The door groaned as I pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and cold. Shelves stretched into shadows. Everything was wrong. Bottles, boxes, containers. Symbols etched into their surfaces that my mind refused to recognize. The labels seemed older than they should be, and newer. Time didn't feel consistent here. I walked slowly, fingertips brushing a shelf. The glass felt sticky, warm. The smell of paper and metal mixed with something acrid, almost sweet. I could feel it watching me. A shadow moved just beyond the edge of the light. I thought I saw it shift when I blinked. Not human. Not fully. The fluorescent lights hummed, struggling, flickering in uneven pulses. Sometimes the room stretched longer than I remembered. Sometimes the aisle seemed closer, pressing in. I picked up a bottle. Symbols spiraled over the surface, twisting in ways that made my stomach turn. It vibrated faintly in my hands, a pulse beneath the glass. Like a heartbeat I could feel through my fingers. I set it down. The shelf rattled. Not heavy enough for a bottle to do that. The hum deepened, static crawling beneath the lights. I stepped further inside. The floor was uneven, coated in dust that clung to my shoes. Every movement stirred whispers in the corners, rustling, soft footsteps just out of sight. Breath caught in the room. Mine echoed back at me. And then another, softer, deliberate. I turned. Nothing. The shelves were still, the products in place. Yet I felt it again. Presence. Watching. Waiting. A pale light shivered across a row of boxes. Symbols shifted, or my eyes did. I couldn't tell. The air felt thick, pressing, carrying the faint metallic tang of something buried in the dust. I reached for another bottle. It hummed more strongly in my hand, vibrating through bone. The hum of the lights grew louder, layering a low, static pulse beneath the floorboards. A shadow moved along the far wall, leaning closer without crossing the light. I held my breath. The shelves seemed to stretch and then contract. Time bent. I could see the outlines of figures in the corners, tall, thin, shifting forms that merged with shadows. I blinked. They were gone, but I knew they hadn't left. The hum softened, then paused. Silence pressed down. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, each beat slow and deliberate. The dust settled around my shoes, and then the air shifted. Something brushed the back of my neck. Cold. Impossible. I spun around. Nothing. I moved toward the door. The shelves seemed to bend slightly away as I passed. The symbols glimmered faintly in the flickering light. The hum returned, low, almost pleased. Outside, the wind picked up. The sign creaked again. The night waited beyond the glass. Pale and still. I hesitated. The presence lingered, patient, watching from the aisles and corners. I stepped onto the pavement. The air smelled of wet asphalt, iron, and something faintly sweet, clinging. I glanced back. The lights flickered, shadows swaying. The bottles and boxes remained. The symbols unchanging, impossible to read. I got into the car. The engine hummed in soft rhythm with the lights behind me. I glanced at the station once more. The hum, the pulse, the waiting. It was alive in its own way. I drove slowly down the empty road. The night swallowed the station, but the memory of it clung to the back of my mind, soft, insistent. Watching, waiting. The road lay empty beneath a blanket of fog. Moonlight glimmered pale and thin, reflecting on wet asphalt. The air smelled of damp earth, cold metal, and something faintly rotten. I saw it before I realized I was looking. A body, sprawled in the middle of the lane. Still, unmoving. Closer now, I noticed details that twisted my stomach. It wasn't fully human, nor entirely animal. Limbs bent slightly wrong, the skin mottled, glistening faintly in the fog. I knelt, hesitant, fingertips brushing against cold flesh. The texture was wrong. Soft like human, yet bristly in places. A subtle warmth lingered, like it had not yet left. A low rustle came from the edge of the road. The fog shifted. Movement, fleeting just beyond the reach of the headlights. Branches swayed as if something passed, careful, deliberate, silent. I held my breath, eyes strained to pierce the gray haze. The air felt heavier, thickening around my chest and throat. I could hear my pulse in my ears, slow and steady, betraying nothing. The body lay still, but I knew it was being watched. I felt it, patient, quiet, waiting for me to notice. I stood slowly. The asphalt was slick beneath my shoes, cold pressing through the soles. The fog shifted again, curling around the trees, moving with intention. Soft footsteps, or the hint of them, echoed in the distance. Not mine. not fully present. They whispered over dry leaves and wet grass, circling without sound. The body's eyes, or what I imagine as eyes, blinked with faint reflection. No human warmth in them, only something patient, something observing. I leaned closer, heart pounding in soft rhythm. The fog swirled, brushing my face and hair, damp and cold. A metallic scent rose from the ground. Iron wet clinging. Movement flickered at the edge of the light. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the roadside. I could feel the presence. Just beyond sight, its gaze sharp and deliberate, waiting for me to make a wrong step. I stepped back. The road seemed longer than before, each line of asphalt stretching into gray oblivion. The body remained still, lying in a twisted repose, neither welcoming nor threatening. Yet I could not shake the feeling it was alive in some wrong way. The fog curled tighter around the trees. Leaves whispered over one another. Branches tapped against each other in uneven rhythm. A hum rose faintly from the ground beneath my feet. Soft, low, vibrating through the soles of my shoes. I dared to breathe. A single exhale carried through the mist. It seemed to answer with nothing. No shift in the body, no trace of movement. Yet the sensation persisted. Watch. I took another step back. The asphalt was slick, each step muffled by the fog and silence. The edge of the woods seemed alive, reaching. Something glimmered, shapes too dark to define, just beyond the diffuse moonlight. I glanced down at the body one last time. Its features blurred, shifting with the fog. Limbs bent at impossible angles. The reflection of pale moonlight on slick skin made it shimmer like water. The footsteps, or whispers, followed softly behind me. Not loud, not hurried. Deliberate, patient, waiting. I turned and moved toward the car. Each step careful, measured, aware of unseen eyes in the fog. The cold pressed against my face, my chest. The metallic scent lingered, faint, clinging. From the edge of my vision, something shifted again. No sound, no rustle, just motion. Patient, quiet, waiting. I reached the car. The door was cold beneath my hand. I slid inside, heart slowing but still alert to every detail. The road behind me was swallowed in fog. The body, the figure, gone from sight. But the feeling remained. Eyes watching, patient, waiting. The farm lay quiet under the moon. Shadows stretched long across the fields, pale light brushing the tips of tall grass. The air smelled of damp hay, cold earth, and faint metal from the old tools scattered near the barn. The barn swayed slightly in the wind. Its silhouette stretched thin and trembling. I could hear it first, rustling, heavy and deliberate, coming from inside. I stepped closer, boots sinking into soft soil. Every movement stirred whispers from the dry leaves. The wind tugged at my hair and chilled my neck. I pressed my face to a crack in the wood. Inside, shadows moved with unnatural precision. A figure mimicking an animal. Not clumsy, not random. Every motion exact, too careful, too calculated. The scent of damp wood and dust filled my nostrils. I could hear the soft scrape of hooves or fingers against the floorboards. It paused. I held my breath. The figure tilted its head, listening, mimicking yet aware. The wind outside gusted. The barn creaked. I flinched as the shadows shifted, folding into corners, stretching along the beams. The figure moved again. I could see a glimpse of dark eyes, too human, too small, glinting in the pale light. I stepped back, careful not to make a sound. The ground was soft, wet beneath my shoes. Every rustle of leaves echoed in the quiet night, and still it moved. I pressed closer to the barn again. Through another crack, I saw it crouch low, arms bending in impossible angles, legs coiling like a spring. It paused, then unfolded with the grace of something not quite human. The smell of damp hay and iron mixed with something faintly sweet, like decay hidden beneath freshness. A subtle hum filled the air, almost imperceptible, vibrating beneath the floorboards. The figure mimicked again, this time more precise, almost rehearsed. I want to call out, but my voice was caught in my chest. I could feel it watching me through the cracks, patient, deliberate. The barn shifted with the wind. Shadows lengthened. Dust rose in tiny motes, drifting in the pale moonlight. The figure's movements synchronized with the sway, but always slightly ahead, anticipating, calculating. I backed away slowly, every step pressed into soft earth, muffled by leaves. The rustling inside continued, careful, deliberate. I could smell its presence, animal yet human, warm and cold all at once. I dared a final glance. It crouched low again, then raised itself, limbs folding in ways they shouldn't. Eyes glinted darkly, reflecting the pale moonlight. Not threatening, not friendly, just aware. The wind picked up, brushing through the fields and across my face. The barn shivered, its timbers groaning softly. The figure moved one last time before vanishing into shadows. The rustling ceased. Silence pressed down, heavy and complete. I could hear my own breath, the soft hum of the earth beneath the barn, the lingering scent of damp hay, iron, and something faintly sweet. I stepped back toward the house. The barn remained still, swaying gently in the wind, but I knew it was alive in some way, patient, waiting, calculating. I glanced once more. The shadows were gone, but the memory of precise, deliberate motion lingered, a figure mimicking life, waiting for the next observer. And in that quiet night, I realized the barn had seen me, and it would remember. The trail lay quiet beneath towering trees. Fog clung to the ground, pale and thick, curling around roots and rocks. The air smelled of damp earth, pine, and something faintly metallic like rusted iron. I stepped carefully. Each footfall sank slightly into soft soil. Leaves whispered underfoot, brushing against my shoes. The air pressed close, cold against my cheeks. The fog thickened. It rose, swallowing sound. Even my own breathing felt distant, muffled, strange. Shadows moved just beyond vision. Shapes that bent, shifted, disappeared whenever I tried to focus. Branches swayed, though the wind was still. The forest seemed alive. A low vibration ran through the ground beneath my feet. A growl, subtle at first, barely perceptible. It throbbed in my chest as much as in the soil. The sound carried without moving, echoing beneath everything. I stopped. The fog pressed against me from every side. I could feel it brushing along my skin, damp and cold. Every sense heightened, every nerve on edge. The shadows lingered, coiling around tree trunks, slipping through gaps in the mist. I caught glimpses of dark shapes. No eyes, no faces, only movement. The growl rose slightly, deep, resonant, vibrating under the soles of my shoes. I swallowed. The metallic tang of the earth, wet and iron-like, filled my mouth. I took a cautious step forward. Branches brushed my arms. The fog clung to my clothes, damp and heavy. Footsteps echoed softly behind me. Or maybe it was my imagination. A shape passed close, low to the ground, too quick to identify. I felt it in the corner of my vision. It was patient, waiting, observing. The trail curved. The fog thickened further. Sound no longer existed. Even the whisper of the leaves, the distant hum of the forest, was swallowed. I could hear only my pulse, and the low growl beneath. I slowed, every step deliberate, careful. The earth hummed beneath me. The vibration traveled through my legs, my chest, my skull. A shadow moved along the edge of the trail. It stretched and folded, impossible angles, fleeting glimpses. I dared not turn my head. It would see me. The fog curled around the trees. Around me, heavy and alive. Branches tapped, whispered. The growl softened, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. I felt it in the soles of my feet, in the tips of my fingers brushing leaves. I held my breath. The shadows paused, coiled patient. The forest exhaled, and silence pressed down harder than the fog itself. A distant rustle. Not leaves, not wind. Closer. Soft footsteps. Soft, deliberate, careful. I took a step backward. The trail seemed to stretch endlessly into gray. The shadows didn't follow, yet the sensation of being observed pressed into my mind. Every rustle, every pulse beneath the ground, a reminder I was not alone. I glanced at the fog ahead. It moved in waves, curling around trees, hiding something. The low growl resonated again, slower this time, more deliberate. The vibrations traveled up through my spine, into my chest. I stepped carefully, hands brushing against wet branches, leaves cold and damp. The trail bent, but the forest seemed to bend too, guiding, folding around me. The shadows shifted again, flickering in and out of sight. I could sense shapes watching from the periphery, patient, unblinking. Not human, not animal, but alive. The growl faded slowly. The vibration in the earth receded. The fog thinned just enough to reveal the path ahead, but the forest remained alive, pulsing softly with a quiet patience. I kept moving, step by step, careful, deliberate. The low hum of life beneath the soil, the soft rustling in the mist, followed me. Every step reminded me that I was observed, that I was not alone. The trail leveled slightly. The fog thinned further. Shadows remained in the corners, folding along trees, stretching beyond vision. The low vibration of the growl lingered faintly beneath my feet, a memory in the soil. I exhaled. The forest held its breath too, and I understood this trail was hollow. Not empty, hollow but alive, watching, waiting. I stepped off the path, careful, feet sinking into wet earth. The fog lingered behind me, swirling softly. Shadows moved just beyond vision, patient, deliberate, eternal. And the growl, a vibration beneath it all, faint, lingering, almost a whisper. I am here. The bridge lay narrow beneath the mist. Moonlight shimmered faintly through the fog, pale and cold. The wood smelled damp, old, faintly of rot and moss. Each step creaked beneath me, a groan rising from deep within the timbers. The river below whispered faintly, lost beneath the thickening fog. Every footfall felt heavier than it should, like the bridge was breathing, alive. The mist rose suddenly, curling around the railings, curling upward into shapes. Shapes, faces, pale and fleeting, half formed in the vapor. Eyes that glimmered darkly. Mouths twisted as if murmuring secrets I could not hear. I stopped. The air was cold and damp against my skin. The smell of wet wood, earth, and something faintly sweet pressed into my nose. The fog clung, thick and almost viscous, a soft brush against my ankle. I jerked my foot back. Nothing there. The mist shifted, curling around my legs. The sensation lingered. Patient, the bridge groaned again. Deeper now, resonant, like it carried weight I could not see. I breathed slowly. The planks underfoot vibrated subtly, pulsing with something beneath. I stepped forward. Pale shapes flickered in the fog, faces forming briefly, then melting away. The river whispered more loudly, or perhaps the mist carried its voice differently. A low hum ran through the bridge, under my feet, up through my legs. I leaned on the railing. Cold wood pressed against my palm. The mist swirled around the edge, curling as if reaching for me. Faces leaned in, shifting. Eyes watching, mouths opening just enough to hint at words I could not understand. A gust of wind passed. The bridge shivered. The fog thickened suddenly, rolling in waves along the boards. The faces twisted more clearly, pale against the gray mist. They did not move naturally. They waited. I stepped carefully, boots pressing into wet wood. The scent of damp moss and rot lingered heavily. The low hum vibrated through the boards beneath my soles, like a heartbeat beneath the bridge. Something brushed against my ankle again. I froze. Nothing was there. The fog shifted with the wind. Shadows danced along the railings. The shapes of faces melted and reformed, watching, patient. I could almost feel their gaze on my back. The bridge seemed alive, aware. I exhaled slowly. The sound carried, muffled by mist, by the thick silence pressing in around me. The river below sighed in pale whispers. The faces remained, fleeting, almost sentient. I continued forward. Each step echoed lightly. But the echo felt wrong, stretched, delayed. Though it groaned again, a long, slow moan beneath my weight. I could feel it pressing against me. Beneath me, something waiting in the shadows. The mist curled higher. The shapes leaned closer. Eyes glimmered darkly in the vapor. They were not threatening, not friendly, just aware, patient, calculating. I glanced down. The river was gray beneath the fog, motionless, hiding what I could not see. The bridge trembled slightly beneath my feet. The soft brush against my ankle returned, more insistent, but still nothing was there. I reached the far side. The fog began to thin, drifting into the trees. The faces in the mist stretched and dissolved. The bridge groaned one final time, resonant, almost like a sigh. The air was cold and still, carrying the faint scent of wet wood and moss. I exhaled, letting breath escape slowly. The shapes were gone. The mist no longer pressed against me. But the memory lingered. The sensation of eyes watching, the low hum beneath the boards, the brush at my ankle that had never been real, and yet it felt so alive. I stepped onto the path beyond the bridge. The fog followed faintly, curling at the edges. The river whispered quietly beneath, carrying secrets I could not understand. I glanced back once. The bridge was empty, silent, yet I knew it had not forgotten me. The mist, the faces, the hum beneath the boards, they were patient, waiting for the next passerby. And I understood. Some crossings were not meant to be hurried. Some places watched. Some bridges remembered. The forest opened into a clearing. Pale light spilled across the ground, unnatural and cold. It glimmered against dew-soaked grass, painting everything in silver. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and something sweeter, almost like flowers long dead. A soft rustle passed through the trees, brushing against leaves and skin alike. I stepped forward, careful, boots sinking slightly into the moist soil. Shadows flickered between the trunks. Eyes appeared, dark and glinting, and vanished the moment I blinked. They weren't fixed, weren't still, just glimpses of awareness. A faint sound hovered on the edge of hearing. Was it laughter or crying? I couldn't tell. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once, carried in the fog and the pale light. I moved closer to the center of the clearing. The grass pressed cold and wet against my legs. The light shifted subtly as if the clearing itself was breathing. Shadows danced at the edges of the clearing. I could see forms moving, but never fully. The dark shapes were patient, deliberate, watching. The air pressed against my face and chest. A low hum thrummed through the ground beneath my boots. It vibrated softly, almost imperceptibly, carrying with it the scent of damp wood and moss. I crouched slightly, trying to focus on the light. It was pale, unnatural, almost liquid. It glowed from everywhere and nowhere. It made the eyes and the shadows gleam brighter, reflecting back like tiny mirrors. The laughter, or crying, rose slightly just at the edge of comprehension. I could feel it in my chest, vibrating, mingling with the hum beneath the earth. The air grew colder, pressing against my neck and arms. Something moved closer, subtle, careful. A shadow slid between the trees, its eyes appearing briefly before vanishing again. Every rustle, every brush of the grass, made me aware of its patient observation. I stepped forward, tentative. The ground felt soft beneath my feet, damp and fragrant with earth and decay. The light glimmered over leaves and bark, shifting with every subtle movement of the clearing. The shadows flickered again. Eyes glimmered, then disappeared. I could feel them observing, patient and deliberate, not threatening, not friendly, simply aware. I inhaled slowly. The air smelled faintly metallic, sharp, lingering on my tongue. Every breath carried the soft whisper of movement in the trees. Every heartbeat echoed softly in the clearing, in rhythm with the unseen presence. I moved cautiously toward the edge. The grass brushed wetly against my legs, the fog curling and wrapping around my shoes. Shapes shifted in the pale light, slinking closer then retreating into shadow. The sound came again, faint, trembling on the air. Laughter? Crying? I could not tell. It was distant, impossible to locate. It brushed against my ears like wind through hollow branches. I stopped at the edge of the clearing. The light glowed pale and constant. Shadows lingered just beyond vision, stretching thin, retreating. Eyes blinked, always too quick, always gone before understanding. The hum beneath the ground pulsed faintly, synchronized with the rhythm of my heartbeat. The fog curled at my ankles. I could feel something brushing the air around me, moving with deliberate care. I took one last step back. The pale light lingered on the grass, untouched by my movement. The shadows faded slightly, eyes vanishing, but the sense of being observed remained. Patient, silent, I turned toward the forest path, leaving the clearing behind. The fog swirled softly as if waving me away. The laughter or crying faded slowly, carried on the pale light and the cool night air. I glanced back once. The clearing was still, glowing softly, quiet. The shadows had receded into the trees, leaving only the pale light and a lingering sense of eyes watching. The air felt lighter, but the memory stayed. The hum beneath the earth. The delicate brush of unseen movement. Eyes that had seen me. And I understood. Some lights are not warm. Some spaces are patient. Some clearings remember. I walked slowly away. The forest closed behind me, swallowing the pale glow. But the feeling of being observed lingered softly, like breath on the back of my neck. Waiting. The thicket pressed close, dense and tangled. Branches clawed at my arms, wet leaves brushing my skin. The air smelled of damp earth, moss, and a faint metallic tang. Every step I took seemed to echo differently, not in sound, but in presence. I could feel it, something matching me, mimicking my pace. Leaves crackled beneath my boots. The noise was deliberate, patterned, unnerving. It was not the randomness of nature. It whispered of awareness, of careful observation. I paused. The thicket seemed to lean inward, enclosing. Shadows twisted between branches. I could feel the eyes before I saw them. A weight pressing, patient, silent. I stepped forward again. A cold brush against my neck made me shiver. The rustling leaves behind me mirrored every movement. Each step forward was echoed subtly, deliberately. I could not tell where I ended and the presence began. Branches tugged at my clothes. Wet leaves pressed against my face. The smell of damp wood and moss was heavy, mingling with something sweeter, faintly decayed. The shadows shifted. I caught glimpses, dark shapes coiling, stretching, moving just beyond clarity. Eyes glimmered briefly, then vanished, leaving only cold space. The hum of the forest grew faintly in my chest, a low vibration, subtle beneath the soil. The leaves crackled again, a pattern, almost intentional, like a rhythm following mine. I held my breath. The thicket seemed alive, aware of each subtle movement. It watched, mimicked, waited. I dared to glance back. The shadows lingered, folding along branches, weaving with the fog. No shape fully revealed itself. But the sense of being mirrored, of not being alone, pressed into me. I took another step. The air grew colder. The thicket's density increased, pressing closer. Leaves scraped against my arms and legs, whispering in deliberate cadence. A subtle vibration ran to the ground beneath my feet. The shadows shifted closer, threading between branches, curling like smoke. I could feel their gaze on my spine. Not threatening, not friendly, patient, observant. The rustling formed patterns in the underbrush. Each movement mirrored my own, echoing exactly, slightly delayed. The mimicry was precise, unsettling. It was aware of my rhythm, my pace, my presence. I stepped cautiously. Hands brushed damp leaves, cold and wet. Branches pressed against my face. The faint metallic tang lingered in the air. And still, the shadow followed, perfectly aligned, patient. A pause. The forest held its breath. The leaves stilled. The fog hung low, curling around roots and branches. The mirrored presence waited. I exhaled slowly. The hum beneath the soil pulsed faintly. The sensation of eyes on me persisted, though I could not see them. Another step. Branches tugged. Leaves whispered. The pattern continued, deliberate. Every movement of mine was known, mirrored, anticipated. I stopped. The thicket pressed from all sides. The shadows shifted in the corners of vision. Eyes blinked, vanished. I could feel them watching, patient, silent. The low hum beneath the soil faded slightly. The wind carried the scent of damp earth, moss, and something faintly sweet. The mirrored steps continued, soft and deliberate, just behind me. I moved slowly toward the edge of the thicket. Branches scraped wetly against my jacket, leaving a faint chill. Leaves whispered in rhythm with my heartbeat. Every sense heightened, every nerve taut. The shadows lingered, coiling and folding along branches. Eyes blinked briefly, glimmering in the fog, then vanished, not leaving, not retreating. Patient, watching, I stepped into a faint clearing. The dense thicket receded slightly. The mirrored step stopped, but the sensation of being observed remained. A presence patient and deliberate, hidden in shadow and fog. I exhaled, letting breath escape slowly. The rustling ceased, leaving only the faint hum of the forest. The metallic, damp tang lingered in the air, and the sense that the thicket remembered. I glanced back once. The dense shadows folded into themselves. No shape fully revealed. Yet I knew. The thicket's secret watched still. I walked away slowly, careful, deliberate. Each step carried a memory of mirror motion, of eyes unseen waiting. The forest held its breath as I left, and the thicket kept its secret, patient, silent, eternal. The fog hung thick and low, curling around tree trunks and rocks. I stumbled through it, breath visible in the cold, damp air. Something moved ahead, or perhaps it was just the fog shifting. A cabin appeared, its silhouette pale through the mist, abandoned, yet strangely inviting, though it smelled of wet pine and rot, faint smoke lingering, as if it had just been left. I stepped closer. The grass pressed down beneath my boots, brushing against my ankles. The fog swirled, thickening, wrapping around me. The door loomed, dark and silent. Inside, the air was cool and heavy. Dust lay thick on the floor, disturbed only in certain patterns. Items, small, unrecognizable, were arranged in a circle, each piece perfectly placed, almost as if waiting. The smell of old would mix with faint incense, sweet and pungent. I knelt to inspect the circle, careful not to disturb anything. The objects seemed to hum, a soft vibration through floorboards, subtle but present. Whispers rose faintly in the air, almost beneath hearing. I tilted my head, listening. Words dissolved before I could grasp them. The hum lingered, mingling with the silence of the cabin. I touched the floorboards lightly. They were cold, the vibration pulsing faintly beneath my fingers. The fog outside seeped through cracks in the walls, curling into the room like smoke. A shadow shifted in the corner. Not fast, not threatening. Slow, watching. The light caught its edge, just enough to hint at a presence. I stood, heart steadying. The objects in the circle remained still, arranged perfectly, waiting. The hum beneath the floor, or perhaps the room itself, pulsed softly. It seemed alive, patient, aware. I stepped closer to the center. The air pressed against my skin, cool and damp. The smell of wetwood grew stronger, mingled with something sweet, almost metallic. The circle of items called attention, unspoken. I could feel a pull toward it, not fear, not danger, but curiosity. The hum vibrated more insistently, threading through the floor into my bones. The whispers rose again, faint, layered in the fog of my mind. I thought I could hear my name, or something like it. The sound brushed the edges of comprehension, teasing. I knelt, fingertips brushing one of the objects. It felt smooth, cold, oddly soft beneath my touch. The circle's pattern seemed deliberate, almost ritualistic. The air hummed, pressing against my ears and chest. A draft passed. The fog shifted through the cracks, curling like smoke over the items. The shadow leaned slightly closer, stretching toward the circle. I didn't move. I couldn't. The cabin seemed to breathe around me. Every plank, every corner, every shadow aware of my presence. The soft hum pulsed with a slow rhythm, matching the beat of my heart. I leaned closer, eyes tracing the objects in the circle. The shadows at the edge of the room flickered, folding into themselves. Eyes glimmered briefly in the mist, then disappeared. I rose slowly, careful not to disturb the circle. The hum lingered, faint but insistent. The whispers hovered at the edges of perception. I stepped back toward the door. The fog outside pressed gently against the cabin, curling into the room once more. The items remained, patient, waiting. The air felt thick with expectation, quiet and observant. I glanced once more at the circle. The shadow receded slightly, folding into the corner. The hum faded, leaving a soft, lingering vibration in the floorboards. The fog swirled gently, like breath on the edges of the cabin. I left slowly, each step careful. The cold would press beneath my boots. The fog wrapped around my shoulders, soft and damp. The whispers lingered faintly, fading as I crossed the threshold. Outside, the cabin stood silent, pale through the mist. Its windows dark, yet somehow alive. The circle remained inside, patient and waiting. I walked away slowly, breath misting in the cool night air. The fog closed behind me, swallowing the cabin, the shadows, the hum. And still I could feel it, watching, waiting. The forest swallowed the path, leaving only the memory. The cabin, the circle, the soft beneath the floor. Curiosity and unease lingering together, like breath in the mist. The highway stretched out ahead, pale under flickering streetlights. Fog rolled low, curling across the asphalt, softening edges and swallowing sound. The night smelled of damp tar and cold air, sharp and still. A figure appeared at the edge of the road. Still, silent, watching. The lights caught its eyes, making them gleam unnaturally, like tiny lanterns in the fog. I slowed. The tires hummed against the asphalt, the vibration low and steady. The figure lifted an arm. I paused. It lifted its arm again, perfectly mirroring mine. A shiver ran down my spine. The fog thickened, curling into the roadside grass, brushing my cheeks. The air felt heavier, pressing against my chest with every breath. I watched it move, not quickly, not deliberately, but perfectly synchronized with me. Each gesture of mine matched, mirrored, repeated. The sensation of being observed pressed against my skin, tickling my nerves. The streetlights flickered, casting long, trembling shadows. The figure's shadow elongated, stretching across the road, blending with the fog. Its eyes glimmered again, catching the dim light like wet stones. I could feel its awareness, quiet and patient. The tires hissed slightly as I inched forward. The figure took a step too, mirroring mine with impossible precision. My heartbeat thumped in my ears, loud, insistent, out of rhythm with the night. Every pulse seemed echoed by the fog around us. I blinked, trying to focus. The fog swirled, thick and damp, curling around my legs, brushing my arms. A faint metallic tang lingered in the air, sharp and unsettling. The figure stayed, unwavering, patient. I lifted my hand slightly. It mirrored me. I lowered it. So did it. A soft, inhuman stillness pressed across the road. No sound, save the low hum of tires and the occasional rustle of roadside grass. I tried to move faster, careful not to glance away. The figure matched every motion. Step for step, gesture for gesture, perfectly aligned. The fog clung tighter now, brushing against my neck, cold and damp. The lights flickered again, long shadows dancing across asphalt cracks. The figure's eyes gleamed like twin sparks, patient, aware, unblinking. I could feel the weight of its gaze pressing against my spine. Then it paused. I paused. A silence stretched between us, thick as a fog. The night held its breath. Even the wind seemed to wait. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady my pulse. The figure remained still. The fog swirled in slow eddies around its feet, curling like smoke. The sense of being mirrored, of not being alone, pressed into me. I blinked, and it was gone. No movement, no shadow, no gleaming eyes. Just the fog, curling softly across the asphalt, brushing my legs and tires. My chest heaved. The low of the car filled my ears again, grounding me. The roadside grass rustled faintly in the cool night air. The smell of damp tar and cold metal lingered. I glanced back briefly. The fog lay thick along the road, undisturbed. No figure, no shadow, no gleam of eyes. Yet the memory of it persisted, heavy and patient in the back of my mind. I drove slowly onward. The asphalt stretched ahead, pale and empty. The fog followed lightly at the edges, brushing against the car like breath. Every now and then, I swore I could feel it watching again, just at the corner of perception. The highway disappeared into darkness and mist. I could hear only tires, my own breath, and the soft rustling of roadside grass. The The figure had vanished, but the sense of its presence lingered, silent, patient, waiting. I exhaled again, slowly, letting my shoulders drop. The lights flickered once more, long shadows stretching and shrinking. The fog drifted along the edges of the road, curling softly, indifferent. The eyes that had gleamed were gone, and yet I could still feel them. Somewhere, just beyond reach, watching. The moon hung low, pale and cold, casting weak light over the abandoned playground. Rust crept along the metal, eating at swings and slides, leaving rough edges that scraped softly against the night air. The scent of damp earth and decaying would press around me, heavy and still. I stepped onto the cracked asphalt. Gravel crunched faintly beneath my boots. The swings moved gently, swaying with a slow, uneven rhythm. Each squeak cut through the silence like a soft, deliberate whisper. A shadow lingered near the slide, small, unmoving, yet intensely present. It watched, patient and silent, like it had waited for me. The moonlight caught the edges of the rusted swing chains. They shone faintly, silver against black. The wind moved through the empty playground, brushing dry leaves across the sandpit. The rusted metal groaned softly, echoing in the stillness. I moved closer, careful not to disturb the silence. The shadow stayed, perfectly still, folded into the slide's curve. Its eyes, or something like eyes, seemed to glimmer briefly, reflecting the pale light. I inhaled slowly, tasting the metallic tang in the air. The cold night pressed against my skin, crawling over my shoulders and down my spine. The swings continued to move, squeaking in the slow, uneven rhythm, almost aware of me. A soft rustle in the sandpit made me pause. Nothing visible shifted, yet the sensation of being watched pressed against me. The shadow on the slide remained patient and deliberate. I approached the swings. Chains swayed gently in my wake. I reached out, fingertips brushing on the cold, rough links. The swing groaned under my touch, yet it continued its slow, uneven arc. The shadow moved slightly, just a hint, enough to remind me it was there. Still silent, still patient. The smell of damp earth grew stronger, mingled with rust and something faintly sweet. I could feel the cold creeping into my hands through the metal of the swing. The night air hummed faintly, vibrating softly against the back of my neck. I stepped back toward the slide, trying to glimpse the shadow more clearly. It remained folded, tiny and still, yet impossible to ignore. The pale moonlight shimmered across its shape, leaving more questions than answers. A soft squeak echoed again. One swing moved slightly faster than the other, brushing the sand beneath its frame. The shadow's presence grew heavier, pressing in on my senses. I could almost feel its breath in the cold night air, though no one was there. I crouched near the sandpit, trying to steady my heartbeat. The playground seemed alive in subtle ways. The swings whispered softly. The slide hummed faintly, and the shadow watched. The rusted metal vibrated under the moonlight, attuned to the silence around it. I stood slowly. The shadow remained, unmoving but aware, like a weight in the corner of perception. The swings continued their uneven rhythm. A single leaf tumbled across the sand, breaking the faint static of the night. The playground stretched endlessly under the moon, empty yet full of presence. Every rusted pole, every creaking swing, every shadowed corner seemed to watch me back. The small figure on the slide did not move, yet it filled the space with quiet insistence. I stepped back carefully, keeping my eyes on the slide. The shadow remained, patient and silent. The moonlight shone through the fog that had begun to creep along the edges of the playground. The air hummed faintly with the slow movement of the swings, the rustling of leaves, the subtle weight of observation. I exhaled slowly, letting breath mingle with the cold night air. The figure did not vanish, but the pressure of its presence eased slightly, folding back into the shadows of the slide. The squeaks of the swings continued, rhythmic and uneven, like slow, deliberate pulses. I turned to leave, footsteps soft on cracked asphalt. The fog rolled gently across the playground, brushing my ankles and calves with damp fingers. The shadow remained at the slide, patient and unblinking. Its presence lingered even as I crossed the boundary of the moonlit space. The playground receded behind me. The swings creaked slowly, endlessly in the cool night. The shadow watched, small and still, yet intensely present. And I could feel it, patient and silent, lingering in the air long after I left. The pines stood tall, dense, their needles whispering in the chill night air. The moonlight filtered thinly through the branches, pale and trembling. The ground smelled of damp earth and pine resin, sharp and sticky. I stepped carefully along the narrow trail, each footfall muted by the thick carpet of needles. Shadows twisted strangely across the trunks, elongating and folding with the faint sway of the branches. A flicker caught my eye. Something moved between the trees. Not quickly, not like a creature I knew, but fluid, unnatural. I blinked. It was gone. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying whispers through the pine needles. They rustled inside, brushing against my ears, soft and urgent. The scent of damp grew stronger, mingling with a faint, acrid tang I couldn't place. I froze. The shadows leaned closer, curling across the forest floor like dark fingers. The flicker appeared again, at the edge of my vision, always gone when I tried to look directly. My hands tingled from the cold. I could feel it creeping up my arms, pressing along my spine. Each breath I took seemed mirrored by the rustling needles, brushing against my cheeks and forehead. The flickers multiplied, brief glimmers between the trunks. Shadows stretched unnaturally, bending across the trail in ways that didn't make sense. I could sense a weight moving through the forest, unseen but present. The whispers returned, closer now, soft, swirling between the needles, sometimes sharp, almost forming words, almost calling me. I exhaled slowly, tasting the cold pine resin on my tongue. Every step I took was echoed by the forest itself. The needles shifted beneath my boots, soft yet deliberate, aligning with my pace. The shadows twisted again, curling around the trunks, pressing the air thin. Something watched, patient, just beyond the line of vision. A sudden gust swept through the trees. The needles danced and rustled, brushing my face, my neck, my shoulders. The flickers darted again, faster, teasing, just out of reach. The forest felt alive, aware of me. I slowed my steps, careful not to disturb the fragile balance. The whispers lingered, brushing the edges of perception. A low hum seemed to vibrate beneath my feet, subtle, continuous, almost like breath. The shadows shifted in response, folding over one another in silent choreography. I stopped entirely. The flickers vanished. The whispers ebbed, leaving a tense silence. The air felt thick, heavy with unseen presence. I could hear the faint rustling of pine needles in the distance, though no wind moved them. A metallic tang lingered on the edges of the night, subtle and unsettling. The trail ahead was swallowed by darkness and shadows, the trees bending inward as if observing. I tried to convince myself it was just light, wind, imagination, but the forest had a rhythm, a pulse, matching my heartbeat, my breath. I could feel eyes, or something like eyes, watching from the shadows, patient, quiet, waiting. The flickers returned briefly, sharper this time, like pale sparks dancing between the trunks. Each movement was deliberate, precise, impossible to follow directly. The shadows around them bent unnaturally, curling toward me and recoiling simultaneously. A single pine needle fell, tapping softly against the forest floor. The sound echoed, faint yet clear, magnified in the still night. The whispers swirled again, brushing past my ears, teasing, lingering. The forest held its breath. I exhaled, slow and deliberate, feeling the damp night air fill my lungs. The flickers faded. The whispers receded, leaving only the soft creak of pines in the wind. Yet the sense of being watched lingered, pressing against my skin like cold fingers. I stepped forward, careful and quiet, following the narrow trail. Shadows move at the edges of vision, never fixed, never still. The flickers had vanished, but the memory of them pulsed in the air, heavy and insistent. The forest stretched ahead, dense and quiet. Needles brushed against my boots with every step, whispering softly, deliberately. I could feel the weight of presence lingering just beyond sight. Silent, patient, observing. The trail disappeared into the deeper pines. The night swallowed the light of the moon. The forest held me in its quiet grip, and I knew, without looking, that the flickers were still there, waiting. The fog lay heavy over the highway. It hugged the asphalt, pale and dense, swallowing the edges of the road. The air smelled faintly of wet tar and cold metal, sharp and clean. I drove slowly, tires humming against the slick surface. The white lines bent oddly under mist, shifting as if the road itself were breathing. Shadows formed in the fog, flickering, then vanishing. Something ran across the lanes. Impossible speed. No sound, only movement. My pulse quickened, though my hand stayed steady on the wheel. The reflection of the streetlights shimmered strangely on the wet asphalt. They split and curved, forming mirrors that shouldn't exist. The fog thickened, muffling even the softness of my tires. I questioned if I was moving, or if the world had paused around me. Another shape appeared, sliding between lanes, almost transparent. It bent like liquid, folding in ways that defied sight. I blinked and it was gone. The silence was absolute, pressing in around me. The smell of damp asphalt grew stronger, mixed with something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. I felt it cling to my clothes, cold and sticky. The fog rose higher, brushing against the windshield, and the headlights threw weak pale arcs into the mist. The road bent again. Not just visually. The asphalt seemed to twist beneath my tires. I glanced at the edges of the lane. Nothing solid remained. Only shadows and fleeting reflections, folding over themselves. I slowed to a crawl. Shapes darted across the lanes, just beyond the beam of my headlights. No sound accompanied them. No footprints. Nothing but the soft pulse of fog moving with me. The wind shifted suddenly. A faint hum vibrated to the car, almost like static, or whispers carried too faintly to understand. The tires squeaked lightly on the asphalt, yet the road ahead stretched endlessly, both near and impossibly far at the same time. I tried to focus on the lines of the lane. They wavered, splitting into ribbons that bent around invisible curves. The fog swirled around them, soft and suffocating. I felt the weight of presence, watching, patient, unmoving. A reflection in the wet road caught my eye. It wasn't mine. Tall, thin, distorted. It mirrored my movements with a delay, as though testing me. I shivered, the air growing heavier in the cabin. I exhaled slowly. Breath formed a thin mist against the windshield. The shapes continued to dart in the fog, fluid and silent, around impossible bends in the asphalt. Every instinct told me to move faster. Every part of me wanted to stop. I realized the fog had swallowed all sound. No wind, no tires, no hum of the engine, only the soft, wet pulse of asphalt beneath me. Another shape ran across the lanes, closer this time, almost solid, yet shifting at the edges, impossible to touch. I blinked. Gone. The fog pressed closer, brushing my face with cold, damp fingers. I tried to follow the bends in the road. They twisted unnaturally, reflecting shapes that had no origin. The streetlights flickered weakly, pale halos cutting through the mist. The reflections on the asphalt doubled, tripled, folding the world into itself. A soft scent of iron drifted through the fog. I imagined it was from the shapes or from the road itself. My pulse matched the rhythm of the shapes' movements. Slow, careful, measured, I slowed to nearly nothing. The world seemed to stretch, compress, then stretch again. The fog moved with me, brushing the car doors like soft fingertips. The shapes ran across the asphalt, just at the edge of comprehension, then vanished into nothing. I questioned my own movements. Was I driving forward or simply standing still? The highway twisted endlessly, reflecting itself over and over. The fog whispered, though no words formed. I exhaled once more, steadying my hands. The shapes faded with the distance, slipping through the folds of the asphalt. The fog thinned slightly, leaving pale outlines of the road beneath. The impossible reflections lingered in my eyes, bending perception. I pressed on slowly, alone in the whispering mist. The highway stretched ahead, wet, pale, and impossible. The shapes were gone, for now, but their absence felt deliberate, patient, watching. The edge of the forest pressed close. Branches leaned over the path, heavy and still. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, thick and cold. I walked slowly. Each step seemed louder than the last. The rustling of leaves followed me, but not with the wind. Something moved behind the trees. I didn't see it clearly. Just a shadow, a shape waiting. My skin prickled. The figure mirrored my pace. Silent, blank-faced. I felt its gaze, though its features offered nothing. The fog drifted low, curling around roots and stones. It smelled faintly metallic. The damp air clung to my hair, my jacket, my skin. I tried to convince myself it was my mind, but the forest shifted, leaning closer with every step. Branches bent unnaturally, brushing the edges of my vision. The figure stayed at the edge of the path, a tall, silent silhouette, its face empty, yet heavy with attention. I could feel it pressing into my thoughts. I paused. The forest went silent. The only sound was my own breath, shallow and quick. The fog seemed to settle, thickening, carrying whispers I couldn't understand. I moved again, careful. Leaves cracked softly beneath my feet. Something echoed them. Steps too light, but perfectly timed. The figure didn't speak. It didn't move closer. It simply followed, watching. A shiver ran down my spine. I sensed the forest leaning in. Every tree, every branch seemed to wear the figure. The stillness amplified its presence. The ground smelled of wet soil and decay. I could almost taste the chill in the air. Shadows shifted at the edge of the fog, dancing with the figure. Each movement deliberate, measured. I stopped again. The figure froze as well. Our silence stretched. The forest held its breath around us. I felt a pull in my chest, a tightening. The blank I seemed to see inside me. Every memory, every fear, reflected in that emptiness. The fog swirled around the figure. Its outline blurred and sharpened at the same time. Almost human, almost not. I took a step forward. Branches whispered against my arms. The figure mirrored me instantly. No hesitation. A sudden gust of wind carried the faint scent of something burned. I swallowed hard. The figure remained still, patient, observing. It did not speak. It did not breathe. I walked faster, my footsteps soft on the wet earth. The figure kept pace, perfectly silent. I felt a weight on my chest, though nothing touched me. The trees seemed to tilt closer. Shadows pooled beneath gnarled roots. A faint hum rose from the ground, barely audible. It vibrated through my shoes, my bones, my chest. I stumbled over a root, hands brushing cold moss. The figure didn't react. It only waited, always at the edge of the fog. The forest grew darker, the fog thicker. Every step felt guided, every turn watched. I knew I could not shake it. I exhaled slowly. The figure remained blank, patient, its presence a low hum against the silence. The path curved. The forest seemed to lean even further, pressing me toward the edge of awareness. The figure followed, unwavering. I realized then, leaving this place might not be possible. The hollow watcher would remain, silent, blank-faced, waiting. The mist rose higher. Soft footsteps echoed in sync with mine. The air hummed faintly, carrying the scent of pine, earth, and something unnameable. I continued, though every instinct screamed to stop. The figure stayed just beyond reach. I could feel its eyes in the fog, watching, patient, eternal, and the forest held us, suspended between breath and shadow. Time folded. The watcher followed. Always, the road was empty. Fog hung low, curling over the asphalt like smoke. The air smelled damp and cold, heavy with wet asphalt and pine. A mirror leaned against a guardrail, cracked and forgotten, its frame splintered, edges jagged. The reflection shimmered oddly, slower than my movements. I stepped closer. The fog blurred my legs, but the mirror held them still, lingering longer than they should. A soft rustle of leaves whispered through the roadside trees. Something moved behind me. I turned, but the fog swallowed the shape. Only the mirror betrayed it. Deliberate, mimicking my gestures, but slower. My fingers brushed the glass. Cold, chipped, the reflection pulsed beneath my touch. I blinked. It didn't. I breathed in the damp air. It smelled faintly of metal and something burned. The fog shifted with each inhale, pressing closer, folding the rodent on itself. The figure in the reflection didn't match me perfectly. Its head tilted too slowly. Its shoulders rolled differently. A subtle wrongness lingered in its posture, as if it was learning me. I stepped back. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes. The sound echoed strangely, stretched by the fog. The figure followed my movement, patient, deliberate. I leaned closer to inspect the cracks. Tiny spiderweb lines fractured the glass, reflecting shards of pale light. Each fragment carried the figure, repeating it endlessly. It multiplied with the mist, a silent audience. A soft hum rose from the air. I couldn't tell if it came from the mirror or the fog itself. It vibrated against my chest, subtle, insistent. I raised my hand. The figure raised its own. Slower, measured. I froze. It lingered there, waiting for me to move again. A chill ran down my spine. The fog thickened. It smelled faintly of wet leaves and old wood. I could taste it in the back of my throat, coppery and strange. I turned away, but the mirror followed my eyes. The reflection lingered. Too long. I could feel its attention pressing into my back. Even without looking, a branch scraped against the guardrail. A small stone shifted underfoot. The figure didn't move suddenly. It never did. It waited, patient, silent. The cracked glass reflected the fog in impossible ways. Edges bent where they shouldn't, warping the road. Shadows pooled at its base, crawling across the shattered surface. I felt the pull of it, slow, like gravity I couldn't resist. I swallowed. The mirror didn't blink. The reflection didn't breathe. I did both. It stayed still. I backed away, careful. The gravel whispered beneath my feet. The fog clung to my jacket, chilling me through layers. The reflection in the mirror mimicked each step, slower, deliberate. I wanted to run, but my legs felt heavy, bound by the fog and the weight of that patient gaze. The mirror seemed to pulse, a soft vibration against the cold air. It hummed with the presence of something waiting, unseen. I turned fully, heart hammering. The road stretched empty. No movement in the fog. Only the mirror reflected something too deliberate. The fog thickened further. It curled around the edges of the glass. The cracked shards multiplied the figure. Each fragment watched, all of them patient. I stepped off the gravel. The mirror stayed behind, reflecting the fog and me in slow, careful mimicry. I didn't look back. The rustling leaves followed my movement, faint, insistent. Even as I walked away, I could feel it, that slow, deliberate presence, mirrored in broken glass, waiting, patient, and the road remained empty, except for the reflection, lingered, too long. The pines stretched tall, dark against the night sky. Fog curled between the trunks, thick and damp. The earth smelled of moss and wet needles. A low hum drifted through the forest. It vibrated beneath my feet, through my chest, crawling along my skin. I shivered. It was constant, impossible to ignore. Shadows shifted, one moment thin, slithering between trees, the next gathering into vague shapes, then retreating, all moving with the rhythm of that hum. I stepped forward. The needles whispered underfoot, sharp and brittle. Each vibration made my hair lift, my breath catch. The fog thickened, pressing close. It smelled faintly of smoke and damp bark, of something decaying beneath the roots. The hum grew louder, or perhaps I drew nearer. I could not tell. A shadow brushed the edge of my vision. I froze. It pulled back, retreating into the rhythm of the sound. A strange, deliberate patience in its movement. I inhaled slowly. The forest seemed to pulse with the hum. The air pressed against my skin, vibrating softly, almost like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. The pines groaned above me. Branches scraped against one another. Or was it the hum translating into motion? It felt alive, breathing, watching. I reached out to steady myself on a trunk. The bark was rough, wet, vibrating faintly against my palm. The sound seemed to respond, fading slightly as I touched the tree, then rising again, pressing closer to my ribs. Shadows coalesced in a cluster ahead. I thought I saw eyes, just for a moment. Then nothing. Only the hum, stretching and bending with the fog. I tried to move, feet hesitant, crunching the needles softly. Each step synchronized with the vibration in the air, the subtle sway of the trees. It was as if the forest itself knew my rhythm, mirrored it, waited. The hum carried patterns, almost like whispers. I could not understand them, but I felt their weight. The cold touched my neck, tracing along my spine. I felt unseen presence in the spaces between branches, waiting. A gust stirred the fog. It rippled over the ground, brushing my face with icy breath. Shadows shifted again, more defined, more deliberate. They moved not randomly, but in careful cadence with the hum. I paused. The vibration pressed against my chest, my throat. It made my heart race and tremble. I could taste it in the air, metallic and sour, hanging heavy with tension. A thin shaft of moonlight pierced the canopy. It illuminated a small clearing. Shadows recoiled from the light, then returned, bending and folding with the sound. The hum felt thicker here, almost solid, pressing into my skin. I tried to leave the clearing. The fog pulled at my vision, curling around my ankles. The shadows swirled, reflecting my hesitation. Every step echoed unnaturally, distorted by the forest pulse. The hum softened for a moment. I thought it might have released me, but the air still vibrated faintly, watching patient. The forest leaned in closer. Silence followed, almost complete, and then the hum returned, low, persistent, as if it had never left. I could feel it in the tips of my fingers, in the hair on my arms, in the very marrow of my bones. I walked, careful, deliberate. The pines stood silent, towering, watching. Shadows shifted just beyond reach. The hum trailed behind me, patient, constant. I did not turn back. I did not look, but I knew. It waited, and I felt it still, long after I had left the clearing, vibrating through the night, through the fog, through me. Fog hung heavy over the fields. The air smelled of wet earth and decaying hay. My breath drifted in small clouds, vanishing almost as soon as it appeared. Through the mist, a farmhouse emerged. Pale light glimmered faintly through the windows, soft and hesitant. It seemed close and impossibly far at the same time. I stepped forward. The grass whispered beneath my feet, damp and brittle. The wind carried a faint metallic tang, like iron left out in rain. The farmhouse shifted as I approached. A door that had been on the left now rested on the right. The porch stretched unnaturally, the boards groaning beneath their own weight. I blinked. It changed again. I froze. A figure appeared in the upstairs window. Dark, still, watching. The outline shimmered like a reflection on disturbed water. I blinked and it was gone. I moved closer. The fog clung to my ankles, cold and damp. The wind rustled through the broken fence posts, whispering softly. I could hear the boards creak beneath my tentative steps. The figure returned, not in the same window. It shifted, sliding into the shadows, a silent observer. I could feel its gaze even as the light flickered pale and weak. The farmhouse seemed alive. Corners extended. Roof lines leaned where they shouldn't. Windows stretched taller, then shrank, as if breathing. I pressed my hand to the doorframe. The wood was rough, cold, almost pulsing beneath my fingertips. I could feel a vibration in the air, soft, deliberate. It matched the rhythm of my own heartbeat. I stepped inside. Dust hung thick, mingled with a faint smell of smoke and something sour. Shelves leaned at impossible angles, jars rattling without wind. Shadows gathered in corners, folding in and out of themselves. I thought I saw movement, a figure darting between rooms, always just out of focus. It mirrored my steps, my hesitation, always waiting, always patient. The windows trembled with a sigh of wind. The farmhouse seemed to lean toward me, urging me forward, deeper inside. Yet every time I turned a corner, the hallway stretched, never ending. I reached for a window. The glass was cold, slick with condensation. I saw my own reflection, and behind it, a shadow where none should have been. I blinked. The shadow vanished. The room was empty. The hum of silence pressed in, thick and almost alive. Outside, the fog shifted. The farmhouse stretched and leaned again, doors sliding and roof lines bending. The figure returned briefly to a window, just for a heartbeat, before dissolving into mist. I could feel it watching, always watching. I stepped back into the field. The grass whispered, cold and wet. The fog curled around me, folding shadows into itself. I dared not look again. The farmhouse remained, impossible, elusive, waiting in the fog. I walked. Every step carried the echo of something unseen. The figure did not follow, not exactly, but I felt its presence. Patient, silent, and long after I left, when the fog swallowed the house entirely, I could still feel it, watching. The ridge stretched ahead, fading into the pale glow of dusk. The air smelled of cold stone and damp pine. A thin mist hovered along the rocks, curling around my ankles. I could feel it first, a weight, subtle, like a glance pressing into my skin. Eyes, everywhere. The trees leaned unnaturally, their trunks twisted toward me. Shadows slithered along the boulders, not with the wind, but with intention. I stopped. My breath caught, soft and ragged. A rustle behind me. Then another. I turned, but only the fog stared back. The shadows began to move more clearly, slowly, almost imperceptibly. They converged, sliding over stone and through branches, as if the ridge itself was alive. The wind carried a low hum, vibrating in my chest. Leaves crackled in patterns too deliberate for nature. I could smell earth and something sour, decay mixing with the cold air. I stepped forward. The rocks underfoot were slick, uneven, pressing against my soles with the thin soles of my shoes. The shadows followed. Not behind, not ahead, but all around. I thought I saw shapes. Eyes glinting from tree hollows dark, unblinking. Watching. Waiting. A soft footstep, or maybe it was my own, echoed in the stillness. The ridge seemed to stretch. The rocks shifted under my gaze, shadows lengthening toward me like liquid. The air grew heavier. A pulse in my ears matched the rhythm of something unseen. I could feel the ground vibrate beneath me, subtle and alive. The shadows paused. A silence so deep it pressed against my eardrums. I dare not move. My heartbeat seemed loud, echoing against the stones. Then movement again, a sliver of dark detaching from the tree line, sliding across the ridge, always just at the edge of vision. I looked to the horizon. The sun had vanished, leaving only the cold violet of twilight. The mist thickened. Shapes became more distinct, merging into forms that were almost human, almost animal. I stumbled forward, breath sharp in my chest. The rocks scratched at my hands as I gripped them for balance. The shadows crept closer, converging from every angle. A whisper curled through the pines. Not words, not language, just intent pressing into my mind. The ridge leaned in around me. The eyes pressed closer. I stopped, stood alone on the precipice. The shadows paused too, hovering, patient, aware. A sudden gust rattled the branches. The shadows shifted again. And then, slowly as if conceding, they receded into the mist. Silence returned. The wind sighed. Only the distant caw of a crow broke the stillness. I remained there for a long moment, alone, breath trembling, eyes still lingering in every shadowed crevice of the ridge. I stepped carefully down, the mist curling around my ankles. Every stone, every tree seemed alive with memory of what had been, and though the ridge returned to stillness, I could feel it, watching. The fog hung thick over the intersection, cold and damp, curling around the edges of cracked asphalt. The horizon vanished, swallowed by white and gray. I stopped at the center. Every direction looked the same. A row of trees bowed toward the road, their branches knitting together in shadowed arches. Silence, so deep it pressed against my ears. My own heartbeat thudded, hollow, echoing. Then, footsteps, soft, uneven, circling. But no one. I turned slowly. Each path twisted back, bending impossibly toward this point. It felt like walking in a dream or a trap. The fog drifted past my face, smelling faintly of wet leaves and smoke. The cold air brushed my skin, leaving goosebumps along my arms. The asphalt underfoot felt sticky, damp with unseen dew. I stepped forward. The footsteps shifted with me. Always behind, yet not behind. Always ahead, yet never quite catching up. A faint rustle came from the trees. Branches quivered, though no wind moved them. Shadows slithered along the edge of my vision, stopping when I blinked. I walked in a circle. The center of the intersection remained the same, unyielding. The fog swallowed everything else. I tried to call out, but my voice dissolved into the white air. No echo returned, only the footsteps, soft, patient, waiting. I shivered. The damp air clung to my hair and skin. I could feel the mist seeping into my clothes, into my bones. Time seemed to stretch. A low hum, barely audible, vibrated beneath my feet. Shadows pulled at the edge of vision, always retreating when I looked directly. I spun dizzy. The intersection looped impossibly. Every path a mirror of the one I had left. Each step forward returned me to the center. A silence deeper than the fog settled. Even the footsteps had paused. I held my breath, listened, then movement. A shadow flickered, long, thin, leaning toward me. It vanished before I could focus. I pressed my palms against the asphalt, cold, rough, clinging to the fog like it wanted to pull me down. The air tasted metallic. I whispered, but the words scattered in the fog. No answer came, only the weight of being watched unseen everywhere. I turned in a slow, endless circle. The crossroad offered no exit, no horizon, no light beyond the haze. Finally I stopped, stood in the center, alone. The footsteps faded, but I could feel them linger. A presence pressed close, patient and quiet. I shivered again, and the fog seemed to lean closer, swallowing sound, stretching the night around me. I could only stand there in the stillness, with the silent crossroad pressing in from every side. The fog thickened around me, a wall of gray, cold and damp, pressing in from every side. I could barely see the road beneath my feet, black asphalt slick with moisture. Shadows moved inside the mist. Shapes, almost human, almost animal. They drifted, swaying as if the fog carried them. Yet their motions were deliberate. My heartbeat quickened, then slowed, syncing with the rhythm of their approach. A slow, impossible pulse, echoing beneath the fog. The air smelled of wet earth and decay. A faint metallic tang, like something had been pressed into the soil and left there. My breath formed clouds that vanished instantly, swallowed by the haze. I stepped forward. The fog shifted around my ankles, curling like fingers. The shapes mirrored my motion, though when I looked directly, they blurred, refusing form. A soft rustle came from behind. Then ahead, everywhere, the fog hummed, subtle, vibrating against my skin. I tried to call out. My voice cracked and vanished. Only the soft, deliberate steps persisted. A shape stopped at the edge of vision. Tall, thin, with something like eyes glinting pale in the mist. I blinked. It had moved closer, though I could not measure the distance. The ground beneath my feet seemed to pulse, matching my heartbeat, matching the slow advance of the fog-born watchers. I could feel the fog brushing against my arms, wet and chilling. It carried faint whispers, so soft I thought I imagined them. But the hum, the shifting shapes, they were real. I moved again. Each step echoed in the fog, though the sound vanished almost as soon as it formed. The watchers mirrored me, deliberate, patient, silent. A shadow stretched across the path, its shape wavering between claw and hand. It leaned toward me, but vanished when I faced it fully. I froze. The fog thickened still more, swallowing the edges of the road. Breath came in shallow bursts, rustling my hair and damp clothes. The shapes circled, patient, waiting for my gaze to falter. Their presence was weightless, yet it pressed against my chest like a hand I could not see. I tried to take a step back. The ground seemed to pull me forward instead. The hum pulsed in tandem with the fog, with my heartbeat, with something unseen just ahead. The shape slowed, shifting closer. A glimmer of pale eyes, reflecting nothing but fog, then gone. I stood in the center of the mist, alone, and not alone. The air tasted of wet iron and old leaves. A faint rustling pressed close to my ears, then silence. I exhaled, slow, shallow. The shapes hovered at the periphery, never leaving, never coming fully into the light. I could only wait, feeling the fog press closer, listening to the slow, synchronized rhythm of steps and heartbeat, knowing I was watched, and the fog watched back. The highway stretched ahead, empty, fog draped over the asphalt like a sheet. My headlights cut through only the nearest few feet, pale and trembling. The air smelled of damp tar and cold rain, though no rain fell. The engine hummed beneath me, low, steady, yet somehow too loud. I could feel the vibrations through the steering wheel. Through my bones, a figure appeared, sudden, impossibly close. I blinked. Gone. Only fog, stretching endlessly. The road twisted in ways it shouldn't, vanishing into gray. Each turn seemed familiar, yet unfamiliar, as if I had already passed it 100 times. The tires whispered over wet asphalt. A rustling came from nowhere, soft, deliberate. I swore the fog shifted, bending around some hidden presence. Another glimpse, a shadow, pale, standing in the center of the lane. Eyes I couldn't see, yet felt, staring, patient, waiting. I blinked. Nothing. The headlights trembled over the fog. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. The air carried a subtle hum, low and vibrating, threading through my ears. The highway stretched on, longer than it should. Every signpost vanished into gray. Every mile behind me seemed to dissolve. A whisper brushed past my cheek, cold, like breath from nowhere. I turned. Nothing. The figure appeared again. Closer now. Elongated shadows bent with it, trailing like fingers over the road. I blinked. Nothing. The fog thickened. It pressed against the windshield, against my skin, damp and heavy. The lights cast long, hollow reflections. The reflection moved before I did. I tried to move faster. The tires whispered over wet asphalt. Yet the road didn't shorten. It stretched infinitely, a loop without end. I felt the pulse of the highway, slow and insistent. The figure lingered at the edge of vision, patient, impossible to grasp. I wanted to close my eyes, afraid I might never open them again. My heartbeat synced with the soft hum around me. I could feel it vibrating in my chest, in the air, in the fog. A presence pressed forward, though I saw nothing solid. I glanced at the rearview mirror. Fog, infinite fog. No horizon, no light. The figure appeared again, right in the center of the beam. Tall, still, eyes I could not see. I blinked. Nothing. The road stretched on forever. My breath came shallow, damp on my face. The hum pulsed again, closer, deeper. I gripped the wheel. The headlights flickered. For a moment, I saw the shadows stretch along the asphalt, then vanish, leaving only fog and the endless black road. I pressed forward. Miles passed, or minutes, I couldn't tell. The road bent, the fog thickened, the hum rose. I realized I might never leave. The highway and the fog and the unseen watcher had no end. I exhaled. The engine whispered under me. The lights trembled on the fog, and the figure waited, always just ahead,